So we all know what placing bets means. Placing bets means wagering something of value on the outcome of an uncertain event with the hopes of achieving a payoff. That's why you would make a bet. You're putting something on the line. You're wagering something of value, your time in almost all cases, often money as well. And you're doing it on something that you don't know the outcome of, but you're doing it because you believe that it's going to give you a payoff. The payoff could be money itself. It could be happiness. It could be contentment. It could be fulfillment, whatever. It's just something you want to get back. We do this all the time, but not just in, sporting or casinos. We do this in life. I mean, the decisions we make in life, I would argue, are all akin to placing bets, if you think about it, because you're always staking something. You're always putting yourself into it, your time and or money. Well, always your time, I'd say, and often our money, and you're hoping to get a payoff out of it, right? If you're going to get an education, you're obviously doing that as an investment. You're placing a bet. You're going to put the time in, you're going to put some money into it, and you think it's going to have a payoff in the way of getting a good job, maybe getting some recognition, whatever it is you're going into, right? If something much smaller, like you're just going to go to a conference or some event or a concert or something like that, you're putting your time and money into it, and you expect there to be a payoff at the end of it, right? Or during it, but there's a payoff there. There's entertainment. There's, the value of maybe getting to meet some new friends, whatever it is, anything in life, from the little minuscule things, everyday kind of mundane stuff we do, to the big life decisions. The decisions we make in life are akin to placing bets. We're always placing bets. Always a great deal of uncertainty in what we do, but we're investing for the sake of getting a payoff. Now, when it comes to making a bet, obviously access to good information is what is going to increase the chances of a bet achieving a payoff. So if we walk into that casino, if there's some kind of information we can use to try to better our situation, maybe it's a blackjack table and maybe there's something about the odds of the card deck, I don't know. If it's a poker table, a little bit more complex, then there's a bit of psychology there. There is the statistics based on the hands that have been dealt, any kind of edge information you can get that's going to make that bet go better. It doesn't guarantee anything, obviously, but it does improve the odds, even just a little bit, that something might happen. There's only so much of that you can do in something like a casino, but if you take something, let's say, like the stock market, which is far more complex in real world, got a lot more moving pieces, then, definitely some information could be used to improve your payoff. Of course, if it's the wrong kind of information, but still beneficial, like insider trading, right? That's illegal for a reason, because obviously that extra information could make you make money in a way that's unfair. But anybody that comes up with a strategy in the stock market is trying to get that information. They're looking at the price to earnings ratios. They're looking at all the, different aspects of information of the underlying company. There's different assets that they want to invest in, and they're trying to put together something with that information that suggests that's worth betting on, right? So access to good information is what increases the chances of a bet paying off. And all the more true, the more realistic the situation. The casino, the poker table, a little bit of information might help. Stock market, it's a decent amount of looking into the situation. Arguably can definitely give you some kind of edge in choosing which stocks, let's say, to invest in. And then in real life, which is even more complex than anything like betting in the economy, the stock market, real life situations are the most complex of all. And of course, we have to use good information to make good decisions. We have to assess the situation. And the better that we can assess that situation and understand the information that we are exposed to, the better we're going to make a bet. Because again, all decisions in life are really akin to placing bets, putting something on the line to get a payoff. Now, if you think about how most people approach getting access to that good information so that they can make their bets better, they're going to do so by conducting research, doing analysis, right? Understanding odds, and kind of placing all of these into a clear strategy. So obviously in the investment world, this makes sense. This is what by and large people do. They research the companies. Maybe they're looking for that diamond in the rough or that undervalued stock that they think is going to explode in the next few months or year. They got different analyses, right? Those PE ratios, all the different stats you can collect on these different companies, the different stocks, thinking about politics and social implications and anything they can really get their hands on, right? Understanding the odds, plugging those into their mathematical formulae and trying to calculate based on probability what might happen, and just kind of getting all that together and merging it into some type of strategy, right? You can turn that into a strategy. You can create kind of signals for yourself. You can give yourself or not yourself, but the stocks, let's say, a score. So the position that you take in the stock market, take a look at companies, get all that data flushed in, everything gets a different score. And then you assign that score to the stocks, and then you base that because now your strategy or your scoring strategy is encompassing the way that you think about the market, right? You can do this with sports betting as well. Think about the handicaps. You got hockey players that are going to match up football players, right? MLB, whatever it is. Some teams are coming off a long road trip. Maybe they've had some downtime, injuries. You could kind of assign scores to all these things and accumulate them and get a total score and then make the bets based on that information. So most people approach accessing good information, which is obviously what would increase at least the chances of a bet having a payoff. Most people go after that good information by conducting research, doing analyses, understanding odds, and just placing all that into some type of scoring system or strategy that they can use to place their bets. Okay, so I think we all get that. I don't think it's a big leap to say that most, if not all, life decisions are, at least in some sense, akin to making bets, right? You're making a wager. We get that good information should increase the odds of making a bet. And the way that you get access to, or people think about getting access to good information, is basically research, right? Analysis, trying to understand odds and maybe running some calculations. That all makes sense. But what really makes a system tick, whatever system we're talking about, I would argue is something far deeper than research, analysis, odds, or strategy can really get at. I get that most people are using those to get at the good information, but I don't think that's where the good information exists. No matter how much you do research, no matter how deep you try to go, it's still surface level, right? It's like the price of the stocks. It's still just surface level. The PE ratios, you can dig deeper, really try to understand the companies. It's still a kind of surface level. And you don't need to know anything about money or economics or anything like that to know that. You just need to understand complexity and systems, right? Systems get their engine of growth or their engine that kind of dictates their behavior through something far deeper than anything that can be analyzed or researched. Something that is more intangible, if you will. Something that doesn't really have a label. So keep that in mind, that what really makes a system tick is something deeper than anything research, analysis, odds, and strategy, can really touch on. I'll come back to that in a second. But another point I want to make is that most combinations of decisions that we can make in life do not lead to a payoff, right? Because they're not connected in a way that overlaps with how a system functions. I mean, this just makes sense statistically, right? So if you just took a bunch of decisions you could make in life or actions you could take in life and you took them at random and you put them together and say, this is what I'm going to do that day, statistically, there's no reason to believe that random selection of decisions is going to lead to a good payoff, right? There has to be something kind of non-random about it, which is gets into going after good information. You want to see what is kind of biasing certain situations, get at good information and use that to decide what your combination of decisions are. Now, I'm not saying you're doing this explicitly every day, but that's the way we go through life. We perceive things, we look at what's going on, we try to understand it, and we use that to base our decisions. Okay, so statistically, out of the pool of decisions that you could make, all the different combinations you can make, by far, the overwhelming number of those are not going to lead to a payoff. And they're not going to lead to any kind of payoff, again, whatever that is, whether that's money, happiness, contentment, right? Making friends, whatever. It's not going to lead to a payoff because they're just random and they're not connected in any informative way to how the systems that we're interested in function, the systems that we're competing in or, integrating ourselves into. We want some type of payoff from those systems. It has to be connected to how those systems actually tick. And, just random collections of actions wouldn't do that. So going back to what really makes systems tick is this something deeper than, anything research, analysis, or odds can kind of give you. The deeper good information that really makes systems tick is something we could call latent information. Latent meaning kind of hidden, right? It's something that does not have a label. It cannot be captured as a performance indicator. It can't be revealed through analyses of odds. Latent information stems from latent structure. It's like the systems that we're competing in life, right? Education, business, finance, doesn't matter. They all have these latent or kind of hidden opaque structures to them. And it's that underlying, ultimately hidden kind of organization or pattern that is within a system that governs its behavior and functions. Okay? And we know this. I mean, we know this from studying as the complexity of a situation or a system increases, the more latent or hidden the underlying structure that seems to govern its behavior is. Okay? So go back. I said, what really makes a system tick is that deep. It's something deeper than research, right? The thing that's deeper than research is that latent structure, that latent pattern. And because we know good information improves the odds of your bet leading to a payoff, then what you're really after when you're making decisions in life, when you're placing your bets, when you're making your wagers, is you're after that hidden pattern, right? You're after that latent structure. Because if you can get access to that, that would be the kind of information that could really improve the payoff far more than any level of research can do, than any form of analysis. And to be clear, the research and analysis is not giving you access to the latent structure, the hidden pattern, because it's ultimately opaque. It's not something that can be revealed through any level of analysis. It doesn't matter how deep you try to go with your analysis, that it's a different kind of deep we're talking about, right? The more numbers you collect is not going to give you access to it. The more time you spend trying to, reverse engineer a system and pick apart its pieces, that's not going to give you access to the latent pattern or that latent structure that drives the behavior of the patterns that of the systems that we're competing in. And yet, that's what you need access to. It's that hidden kind of almost secret underlying pattern that drives the behavior, because if you know how the thing behaves, you have a good idea how it's going to behave going forward, right? And then you can place your bets accordingly. If I really know how the degree I'm getting at university tends to play out in the economy, then I can make a bet on that in a more informative fashion. If I really, and again, it's not just, well, it's a popular degree and there's a demand in the market, so that's good. Nah, that's all surface level stuff. And I'm not saying that's useless. Of course, that's something you should pay attention to. But there's deeper things that overlap with your core interests, your core value systems, the unknown ways that a market can change, and on and on and on. It's far deeper than anything that you can assess through surface level analyses, right? And all analysis, in the sense, I would argue, is essentially surface level. All you have are just top level signals and top level numbers and stuff you can look at. That's not going to get to the depth. Okay, so latent information stems from latent structure, the hidden deep stuff. And it's that underlying stuff that dictates the organizer pattern, the pattern that systems follow, right? It governs the behavior and its functions, and that's what we need access to. Okay, so let's do a really quick recap, make sure that we're all still aligned here. I said, look, we all get what placing bets means. You wager something of value on the outcome of an uncertain event. And of course, you do that with the hopes of achieving some kind of payoff. Payoff can be money, happiness, contentment, fulfillment, friends, doesn't matter. And then I said, well, pretty much all decisions that we make in life are akin to placing bets. You're putting something on the line and you're trying to get something back from it, right? And then I said, it's access to good information that increases the chances of a bet achieving a payoff, right? There's no guarantees, but the more information you have, or the better information you have, rather, the better chance that you are going to get a payoff, because now you're kind of in communication with nature, right? You're in communication with kind of the driving force of the system that you're trying to bet against, right? And then I said, most people approach accessing good information by conducting research, doing analysis, understanding odds, and placing all those into some kind of clear strategy, which of course makes sense, right? That's what most people would probably do. But then I said, but what really makes systems tick, which is really what we're after when it comes to good information, what really makes systems tick is something deeper than research analysis or odds, or any kind of strategy that you can come up with. There's all kinds of combinations of decisions you could make. Most of those won't lead to a payoff, but a few of them are going to be connected in the right way that overlaps with the way a system functions. And that's related to this deeper good information that we're trying to get after. The thing that really makes a system tick, the latent structure, the latent hidden pattern, that's the good information that would improve the bets that we make in life of having a payoff. So now I want to say that those latent patterns are aligned to our intuition. It's a feeling that we get from our exposure to all that surface level information. So in other words, you might be doing research. I'm not saying research is bad. You can go do some research. You need to do lots of reading. You can kind of consume whatever the bet is you're making, whether it's something like a stock market or something in everyday life, right? Maybe you're trying to decide to take a job. You go into the interview, maybe you meet some people, you shake some hands, you're collecting information, right? Even if it's just implicitly. All that sensory information is coming in, and you're thinking about the company, and you're weighing some pros and cons. That's a type of research, right? But at the end of the day, it's a feeling that we get from all that exposure to that information, all that surface level stuff, that really matters. It's really the feeling. And this is a rigorous scientific thing. This is not, hand wavy. You talk about feelings, you talk about intuitions. People kind of think, well, that's not data driven, or that's not, analytical. Well, you're right, but it is actually far more rigorous in terms of thinking about how humans have evolved to have emotions. Intuitions must exist for a reason, and I'm a firm believer that those intuitions are tapping into more of the core drivers of systems. Okay? In other words, if you pick up intuition on something, it's not just some random ephemeral kind of thing that pops in and goes away and who knows why it's there. Just because it doesn't have a label, just because we can't be precise about it, does not mean it isn't absolutely connected to the way nature works. And because it doesn't have a label, because it's not precise, I would say it actually has a much stronger connection to the way the world actually works. Okay? Because there's too big of a cost to precision, which I've talked about, right? When you are really precise, when you rigorously define something in that precise kind of way, what you're doing is you're stripping away all the complexity to make something what it is. But intuition doesn't do that. Intuition doesn't strip all that complexity away. Just because you don't have a label for it, it's good you don't have a label for it. You're feeling it for an evolutionary reason. And there is, in my opinion, you're tapping in to that latent pattern, that latent structure that truly dictates the behavior and functions of the systems we're competing in, okay? So I'm saying latent patterns are aligned to our intuition. It's a feeling we get from our exposure to surface level information. Now that feeling, which is anchored to the latent information, the latent structure, the latent pattern, represents a set of decisions that work, okay? Latent patterns align to the combinations of decisions that tend to lead to a payoff. Now, you don't need to explain this by reverse engineering and showing how it all adds up. That's not going to work. You just have to use common sense and rationality to realize that humans must have evolved intuitions for a reason to maneuver through complex environments. It must be that the feelings and the intuitions we have are anchored onto something latent. And what that is, more practically, is a set of decisions that you can make in your environment. A set of decisions that, in combination, tend to lead to better payoffs. This is how humans have survived. Okay, now, let's use an example, something more kind of real world today, like the stock market. Now, you could say that most sets of choices we make are, regarding stocks, let's say, to buy, those are not going to produce a payoff. Again, just statistically, just take random stocks. Why would that lead to a payoff, right? Of course, you might get lucky, but there's no reason to believe out of all the combinations you can make that any of those would be really good. So the overwhelming amount of combinations you make of stocks are not going to have a payoff, but there are still many possible sets of stocks, obviously, that we could buy and that could produce a payoff. Now think about the life version of that, right? Same with life. Most sets of choices we make in life, like I said before, life decisions are not going to produce a payoff, just statistically, why would they? But there are still many possible sets of life decisions that we could make that would produce a payoff. Now, why am I saying that? Well, that feeling that is anchored, that intuition, right? That's anchored to latent information. I think that represents a set of decisions, or could represent a set of decisions that are likely to produce a payoff if you were to use them as such. Okay? So, in other words, to bring this back essentially to the title of the episode, Bet What You Know. What you know, as in what you really know, like truly know deeply, is not what you have gathered through research and analysis, but the things you have intuition on. Now think about that. It's intuition that relates to pattern recognition, right? Pattern recognition is not something that is subject to analysis or collecting different, numbers and putting them into an equation. Even pattern recognition systems in artificial intelligence aren't like that. Right? That's why they call AI alchemy sometimes, right? It's very much a black box because it's based on heavy amounts of iteration and feedback loops. And nobody really knows how the pattern recognition is able to achieve what it achieves. It's more akin to intuition. It is intuition that relates to pattern recognition, not analysis. It is intuition that relates to valuable cues or signals about the significance or potential outcomes of a situation. Analysis can't give you that. It is intuition that integrates with rational analysis because it allows us to evaluate the implications of our intuitive insights within the context of our goals, our values, and available information, like I was saying at the beginning, right? It's not just, a few decisions lead to this and that. You got to think about, that degree you get. It's not just market demand or whatever. What about your goals? What about your values? What about all that available information? You can get a degree. There could be market demand. You can go into it. You can get the job, and you can suck at your job because you got no intuition on it. Right? It's you took the degree because there was a demand for it, and you just suck at what you do. That can happen all the time. You have to take into account much more complex information, and the way that you do that is through intuition. It is intuition that represents the knowledge that we gain through experience and learning. That's like an implicit or tacit type of knowledge, right? We can't articulate what that is consciously. but that's its power. That's the point. If you could articulate it precisely, the only way you could do that is if you stripped all that complexity that you needed to account for how the systems in nature actually operate, okay? It is intuition that leads to rapid decision-making. Sometimes this gets pathologized in modern society as though that rapid decision-making is a bad thing, that system one, it's as though it's like a remnant from our evolved past and it's that kind of slower system two that must be better. No, that's not true. Rapid decision-making is the type of decision-making that works under complexity in real-world situations, not the contrived kind of modern academic systems that we try to create. It is intuition that arises out of constant feedback loops with our environment, which of course is critical. You want to talk about getting good information to make good bets. You better believe that you need feedback loops to achieve those. You got to constantly get response, make the adjustment, get new information, make the adjustment. This is how evolution, in any sense, happens. Intuition arises out of constant feedback loops. It is intuition that demands our trust, right? And thus confidence. So think about confident decision-making. That's a good thing. Confident decision-making is far more aligned with intuition than it is with any level of analysis, I would argue. Okay, so making bets based on intuition is how we truly bet what we know. That's not what most people would think, right? A lot of people would say, okay, well, if you want to make a good bet, you need good information. And so you got to bet on what you know. So I'm going to go know stuff by researching a lot of stuff. And to some extent, of course, that's true. I mean, research in the sense that you need to be exposed to a lot of information, but they mean more than that. They mean I'm going to analyze it. I'm going to reverse engineer it. I'm going to pick it apart. I'm going to create, like key performance indicators, and I'm going to create a scoring mechanism. And then I'm going to put that into a strategy and a plan. And by the time you get to that point, you have stripped so much of what actually makes systems tick, that latent hidden pattern, structure, that latent information that we're actually after. To really get at the good information that improves the payoff of the bets that you make in life, which is really any decision in life, you got to use intuition. It's intuition that represents some unique synthesis, some unique combination of decisions or actions that you can take that has a direct line to how nature actually functions. And that's what you need to bet on. Okay. And this can change throughout a project or throughout your life. I spent a lot of time, let's say, writing code to build a minimum viable product, essentially kind of a prototype of your application. And I love that. It's very intuitive for me. I like to discover by building as opposed to brainstorming on a chalkboard and then trying to go build the thing. I'm very much against that. I think you need to discover by building. So that's me. That's a good bet to make. But eventually that product is essentially discovered and now it needs to scale. It needs to have a bunch of best practices added to it. It needs to go to production. I can do that too. I could place my bets on that, but that's not really me. That's not the things I like to do. But there are other people who do like to do those things, right? There are other people that love they have intuition on what unit tests to come up with and how to best scale a product and how to integrate it with existing systems. So here's a real life situation where originally I was making a bet on what is truly me, and then something changed. The product's now ready to go to production. It's got a scale. It's got all these other concerns. I could do that. Right? What makes life tricky is that not that there's a lot of things we can't do, but often that there's a lot of things we can do, right? And it's choosing which one. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Just because I can bring a product to production doesn't mean I should. If that's not where my intuition is, that would be a bad bet. So now I might hire developers. They can go take that product to production, and I'll go to something else that I'm really good at, which is just like talking about things and telling stories. Maybe that's what I want to do, right? I'm writing code in both situations, but the first situation was much more aligned with my intuition. So anyways, I'm saying that you got to bet what you know. You have to make the bets in life, which you're doing anyway, whether you like it or not, based on this deep-seated intuition and feeling that you have about a situation. And that is a rigorous scientific thing to do. That is something that is truly based on reality, because there's no way we evolve these intuitions randomly. We must have evolved them to make decisions in complex environments, which means intuition has a direct line to how systems tick. That's the information you're after. Yeah, you still have to have some level of research, but it's not the picking apart. It's not the analysis. It's not the reverse engineering. It's not the coming up with performance indicators and score charts and strategies and all this. You want to do a little bit of that? Fine. But at the end of the day, You got to make your bets based on intuition. That's how you bet what you know. And if you bet what you know, that's going to dramatically increase your chances of getting a good payoff in life. Okay? That's it for this episode. Thanks so much for listening. As always, take care. And until next time, see you around.